Welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 2919 East Broadway. This is a special edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you live on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live, download our free app, and stream all of our live local shows, including Solomon on Blast and the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly. We can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today so I can talk to cats that are continuing the evolution of music that does not worry about where the one is, stretching out, stretching consciousness, opening new portals, and a guy who is really, in my mind, one of the most industrious and creative and spontaneous players, multi-instrumentalist, Barry Sless. Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Well, hey, Jake, thanks a lot. I appreciate that. Thanks for the nice introduction.
Did you, that was just a riff on a jam. That was from July 17th of this year, going back a couple months, Funky Bitch. Phil Lesh and Mike Gordon, Terrapin Crossroads with Barry Sless, San Rafael. Does that ring a bell?
It does. I believe that was the Big Bass Bash.
Yeah, can you talk about how that worked out? Because I'm thinking to myself, how the heck, with those two guys with so much to say, how did they get it all? How did they work that out?
Well, they somehow worked it out. To be honest, from where I was on the stage, I couldn't always tell who was playing what, but it somehow it all seemed to work out. I mean, they're both players with very big ears. And hear everything else that's going on and instinctively know where to go with it.
How familiar were you? It's funny, I was talking to, I talked to a ton of cats about this issue lately. I've been just kind of obsessing about it. The idea that, any note can be the one. Okay, the idea that, we're all hung up today. You go to a formulaic rock show or an R&B show or whatever it is, throw the labels out. But, everyone needs, where's the one? Got to know where the one is. This is my generation, younger.
Right.
And yet, first I heard from Papa Molly that he became completely liberated when Billy Kreutzmann told him that any note can be the one. And then he riffed on his philosophy. And then I talked to Anders Osborne last week, and he's talking about Phil Lesh. That concept came from Phil, where he did not want to have anyone. He does not want the one anywhere. And I just want to talk to you about in your career, because you're playing this stuff. It sounds just peppy and uplifting and blazing. But when did you first sort of come to the fact that that any note can be the one? It will all come back around again. Can you talk about the first time in your career when you kind of, you got off on that?
Well, coincidentally, the person who told that to me as well is Bill Kreutzmann. He was doing some shows with the David Nelson Band in Hawaii one year, and we went off into a jam, and I think I looked over at him and, because we just sort of, we were spinning and we were out there, and every now and then you like to have a little landmark or something.
Right.
And so I was like, where's the one? He goes, they're all ones. And he said something about playing in one, instead of playing in four, playing in one. I was like, oh, okay. So, yeah, no, that is kind of liberating that you can sort of, you can just go off on whatever musical tangent that you're feeling, that the collective group mind is feeling at the moment. And, you've got that freedom of, making statements that don't necessarily have to be in 4/4, and sometimes it's one person or another, which will sort of bring it back into the concept of a one, and the group will turn, and then there's a new one, and we'll play for a while, and we may stay in 4/4 or 6/8 or wherever we are at that moment, or something else may happen, and it may get super free again and liberate the one.
So liberating the. I love talking to you about this because I'll be honest. Barry, I was down South Tucson like a couple years ago, and we'll play the track later. But I found this this album on vinyl, which is, I only collect vinyl, and it's cowboy jazz. And there's Barry Sless in this psychedelic excursion in Boulder, somewhere in Colorado, with a bunch of cats from Baltimore, I think, some groovy women too, just burning. And that was more like, swing jazz, like cover tunes, but done in the country jazz, cowboy jazz sense. But you really never got liberated on the one before being with Dean Nelson in Hawaii with Kreutzmann?
It's possible, but I didn't really think about it. I do remember, let me see, maybe jamming with Phil, and I can't remember whether it was Kreutzmann on drums or Molo on drums, sometime in like 1999 or 2000, and we were rehearsing at the old Grateful Dead studio for some gigs we had coming up, and just getting them just to some really free jamming where it just I suddenly felt like, hey, I can do anything. It fits. It's working. I don't have to think. And I didn't, at the time, I wasn't thinking specifically about, it's a new one or there is no one. And I just remember it just being some of the freest playing that I was able to do for some reason. And I couldn't put my finger on it other than I was just playing with other players that weren't necessarily locked into there having to be a specific one. Once we get out there, into some serious improvisation. I mean, of course, when you're playing a song and you're backing up a vocalist or something like that, that's a different story. You got to have, you kind of got to have the one there. But when you're going off as a group into some collective improvisation, and you're going out on a limb, it's not quite as necessary. Although you want to you want to establish something every, a little signpost every now and then. So, everybody's got something to grab onto, and then you can sort of take off on a new tangent from there.
I love it. We're talking to Barry Sless here on the Jake Feinberg Show live on Power Talk, and already he's dropping some serious knowledge. I mean, as sort of a graybeard, I mean, you have really been on the bandstand, just on fire, in this century and before. And, I'm curious about if when you talk to, like, I'm 38, and a lot of younger cats, again, there's so much of music today, Terrapin Crossroads aside, or, cats like yourselves, David, guys that are, that have been doing this stuff for a while still can do the touring circuit. But so much of music is being created in academia today, if you can actually afford to go there. And I don't really know if the vocabulary of music can grow within the four walls of academia. So, I mean, when you're working with younger cats, especially when it relates to free-form improvisation, because listen, if it's not done, you're talking about Molo or Kreutzmann, as a drummer, if it's not done well, it can be a mess, right? It's you have to have you have to be able to hold that down. So,
yeah.
And I know you're not a drummer, but when you talk to cats that are more insecure, have less experience, and you want to stretch out, what do you talk to them about? How do you get them to feel the music and get them to feel comfortable on the bandstand?
Oh, well, that's a big question. Just encourage them to not feel the confines of like once we go off into jamming. The first thing you do usually is lose the confines of a chord sequence or a chord structure, and you kind of you might settle on a root to start with, a root note to start with, and and then the time could you just kind of have to go with the flow and go. I mean, the big thing is just musical communication and everybody listening to everybody, and kind of getting out of your comfort zone, and not being afraid to just do the things that maybe you haven't done before. If you're hearing it in your head, but you haven't necessarily played it before, go for it. And, there's a lot of trust involved when you've got, 4, 5, 6 musicians just going out there on a limb, and you kind of have to be able to trust that that you can let it go out as far as the group mind wants to take it, and that at some point somebody's going to play something, that you can hang your hat on and get back to some kind of form. If that makes sense.
Well, I mean, I think I'm so fascinated with nonverbal communication on the bandstand. You're not obviously, theorizing this stuff, and I'm not a musician, but you're playing with younger cats, and you don't have that kind of trust. Can you talk about some of that nonverbal communication that either Nelson uses or any of the that allows people to coalesce and eventually, find that root again, or plant a seed and eventually know where it comes back around?
It's just kind of a thing that you hear after you've been doing it for a while, or it can just be a simple nod, like, if I'm doing a riff, and like a lot of the people that I play with right now, John Molo and Pete Sears come to mind. It can be a little sideways glance, which we don't even have to do anymore. We kind of know
that's great.
Each other's playing so instinctively that it's like, okay, here he goes. This is where we're going to hit like a big one or something like that. And, sometimes you might want to look over just to see if everybody's got it. But 9 out of 10 times with those guys, we all hear each other and we hear, where each one's going. And pretty much anybody can lead it at any time. Like somebody comes up with a musical idea and, the other guys will kind of jump on it, and somebody might hear something else out of that takes it somewhere else, and we're all just sort of following each other, and it's really not about just one guy doing his thing and everybody else tagging along. It's about the constant musical conversation going on, and that's what I would tell other people that haven't done it as much, is just listen and converse, and have it be like, here you and I are having a conversation and you're asking a question and I'm giving the answer, and sometimes I'll go longer or you'll go longer, and sometimes we're having shorter phrases, but the inflections in my voice are answering the inflections in your voice and vice versa, and it's sort of like that musically too.
I dig. Do you think that how much of that, because you're talking about Sears, legendary character, but the conversation, how much of that came out of this psychedelic period? To me, it's like before you had show tunes, you had Broadway tunes. Bebop was, and I'm producing a documentary, independent film doc on Stan Getz. So nobody knows this about Stan, but Stan was like a monster bebopper, like right with Sonny Stitt and Dizzy, and those guys were junkies, and they were smoking weed, whatever. But then in the '60s, the psychedelic movement came along, and you had Quicksilver, which kind of gets always overlooked. Sears was part of that British invasion, but then he came over to the States. Obviously, you had the Grateful Dead, you had the New Riders, the list goes on and on and on. How much of that musical conversation had to do with the climate of that psychedelic period?
I would say that, from my perspective, very much of it. It probably started with a jazz kind of a concept, and just the improvisation of jazz, and even if what everybody was playing were not necessarily would be considered like the notes of jazz, right, or whatever,
right,
the concept of the improvisation and the free form and it going wherever the group mind wants to take it. I think it started there, and then the early the 60s San Francisco groups sort of, probably got it from that. I think the guys in the Dead were listening to a lot of jazz, and Coltrane and Elvin Jones and stuff like that. And a lot of that probably informed where they went with the jams, which in turn, influenced a whole another generation of players.
I was going to say, because I was talking to one of the Merry Pranksters, George Walker, and he talked about seeing Rahsaan Roland Kirk with Dizzy in like '61, and he said that was not jazz. It wasn't bebop. Excuse me. It was psychedelic jazz, and I think that stuff had a huge impact on guys like Garcia and Lesh. To me, it was like stretching the boundaries. What kind of jazz? You grew up in Baltimore, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of jazz were you getting off on? You're a little bit, you were definitely more marinating in that 70s decade. Can you talk a little bit more about like what jazz you were getting off on and the cats you were listening to?
Probably some of the earliest stuff that I recall hearing, from in the jazz world was probably Miles Davis in A Silent Way. Of course.
I mean, like in a live setting, like in a sticky bar.
In a live setting, I believe it or not, I didn't see a whole lot of it back there. When I was living back there. I know there was some that came through. I saw the occasional jazz guitarist that came through. I remember it was Charlie Bird and two other guitar players that did like a little three-piece guitar thing that was amazing. Herb Ellis, maybe.
Joe Pass, Herb Ellis, and
maybe that's what it was.
Oh, that's great! You went to see that, or maybe like Tal Farlow or something. Who knows?
No.
Yeah.
I think it was the other three you mentioned, and it was just amazing. But I didn't see, I didn't really see that much other jazz. Most of the, stuff that I heard was on record, and the, one that stood out to me was In a Silent Way.
And why?
As of being sort of a, psychedelic. I found something sort of psychedelic in that music. That was sort of what my definition at the time of was psychedelic. It was kind of represented on that record.
Well, we got a game on this program called Name That Tune, and like I said, Barry Sless has been on my radar for a while, but then I found this little thing a couple years ago. Let's take a listen to this, and we'll come back and talk about it.
Great.
Hershey's 10 cents a piece. Then hug and kiss each night by Jingle Boy. It's worth that price. Back in Nagasaki where the fellas chew tobacco and the women wicked wacky boo. Fujiyama, you get your mama, then your troubles increase, boy. South Dakota, Minnesota, Hershey's 10 cents a piece. Then the hug and kiss each night by Jingle Boy, it's worth that price. Back in Nagasaki where the fellas chew tobacco and the women wicked wacky boo. Fujiyama, you get your mama, then your troubles increase, boy. South Dakota, Minnesota, Hershey's 10 cents a piece. Then the hug and kiss each night by Jingle Boy, it's worth that price. Back in Nagasaki where the fellas chew tobacco and the women wicked wacky boo.
Music on the Jake Feinberg Show, brought to you by the Stereo Hospital, the Circle Tree Ranch, and Abbott Taylor Jewelers, and we thank them for their support. All right, Mr. Sless, what do you got for us, brother?
Wow, that was a blast from my past. Cowboy jazz, playing the Cab Calloway song, Nagasaki.
Beautiful work.
I haven't heard that in a long time. Thanks.
Well, let me tell you something. I'm sitting. There's always this period of time with kids. I mean, I have two young daughters, and it's like after dinner, it's like, what are we going to do for an hour before we put them to bed? Because all I really want to do is go out and listen to some jam where nobody's concerned about the one. And and even though that's not what this is, this album is it's just so upbeat, and I love the instrumentation, man. First of all, the drummer has really great chops. I just love the fact that it's like traditional bluegrass instruments or even newgrass instruments in like a swing jazz setting. I mean, can you break this story down? This is why I do my show. This is one of the sickest bands and probably the best name. And like I said, I found a tattered copy for 25 cents, and it's like one of my favorite albums.
Well, cool. Well, thanks. Well, I wouldn't say that we were the first people to do that. I mean, kind of we were playing our own version of Western swing, which was, sort of who was credited as being the father of Western swing was Bob Wills and his Texas Playboys, and a guy who wrote like San Antonio Rose and Faded Love. And if you listen, I mean, he had recording, I think they started in the 30s, and he had different versions. I think he started with bigger horn bands, and then maybe after the war, I guess the story that I heard was that he had couldn't afford to pay as many pieces, so he was using smaller bands with string players, and he would have like twin fiddles, steel guitar, piano, bass and drums. Did I say guitar?
Not yet.
Electric guitar.
Sure.
Maybe electric mandolin. And he had some great players in his band. There were some great steel players. One of my favorite.
This is Bob Willis you're talking about?
Bob Willis, yeah.
If you can point me to an album, because I was like, where does the precursor to these, on top of, I know there were females like vocal groups, but you're telling me if there's one particular album, because that stuff normally is kind of snoozy to me, but I didn't know that he did that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, there's lots of that stuff. I mean, the first album that I got turned on to was actually his last album, and it was sort of like a reunion of him with some of the Texas Playboys, and I think it was called For the Last Time. And as I recall, it was a double or triple album, and they were going back and doing their, the old tunes. And I think he had a stroke a few years before that, wasn't able to do what he used to do, but it was enough where I could get the taste of the music. I think Merle Haggard sang a few things on there. I remember one of my favorite, probably my favorite fiddle player, Johnny Gimbel.
Is he still with us?
I think he passed away recently.
Oh man, he's a badass. Yeah.
Yeah, him, Tiny Moore on electric 5-string mandolin. The guitarist was Elton Shamblin, who kind of, I guess maybe people would say he had a little bit of a Charlie Christian kind of a style,
sure.
But he did this walking rhythm guitar where he's kind of had like a different inversion of the chord or walking, like each beat was like a different chord. And sometimes, if you weren't listening close, you might think it was the bass, but it was actually him on guitar. And just that was a sound that really caught my ear. And then I went back and listen to some other stuff. I can't think of any things offhand, but some of his stuff, and actually some of his stuff, I'm going to say from the late 40s or early 50s, was kind of a precursor to rockabilly. Like, it was sort of rocked up Western swing that just started to get a little wilder and crazier. And this is exactly my pocket. Go ahead. Cool. And that sort of like, I think, shortly after that was like Bill Haley and the Comets, where they were kind of lauded as being one of the first rockabilly acts. And they really I think they started off as like a Western swing band, but they really rocked it up. I'll tell you a good Western swing album. I don't know if I remember the name of it, but it was Bob's, I guess, maybe younger brother, Billy Jack Wills. Had a couple albums out, and they might have been reissued by either Bear Family or Hooley or one of those labels, but I can't. Maybe it was Blues Model A or something like that. But
I got to check. I'm going to get it right away. Hold on. It's the same spelling of the last name, Willis.
Wills, Wills.
Wow.
And it just had some real rockin' stuff on it. Another great album that has two great players on it. That's sort of instrumental Western swing that maybe leans, to more to what some people might call pre-bop. It was by Jimmy Rivers. It's called the Cherokee. Jimmy Rivers and the Cherokees.
Wow.
Brisbane Bop. And that is just a fantastic instrumental album. It has some of my favorite guitar playing and steel playing in that genre. The steel player was Vance Terry, and the guitar player Jimmy Rivers. And it was just like recorded on somebody's little, reel-to-reel in maybe the early 60s at a bar in Brisbane, which is sort of a suburb of San Francisco area. And just some rock and stuff. The guys are just playing like jazz instrumentals and, playing ahead and then playing the head and then going off and soloing over the changes. And
yeah, you said Vance Terry on guitar,
Vance Terry,
Bobby Collins on drums. I'm looking at this Brisbane boy. You're opening me to a new portal of music now. I thank you so much for this.
Cool. Happy to do it.
Well, because I mean, can you talk a little bit? I mean, I appreciate it, but can you talk how the live touring circuit has changed since your career began, in general?
Well, let me see.
Let me before you go on, I just want to make a point to say that I really believe cats like yourself and legions of other people were able to develop individual sound because of the propensity of venues and the touring circuits that were available in the 70s and the 60s even, and then now you don't have as many venues yet. You got Terrapin Crossroads and things like that, which is cool, but it's my justification that because you guys had more venues to play at, you were able to develop your own individual sound, and it's harder today to find that. You're not on the bandstand as much. So I mean, that's why I wanted you to talk about the touring circuit and if it relates to people being able to develop their own sound.
Yeah, I would say the more you're out there doing it in different places for different people and seeing different things. Yeah, I would say that has an influence. I'm not sure what when I started doing it, there was a whole different set of circumstances and different style of music. So I can't say right now if there's not a lot of venues for maybe some younger bands that are involved in a completely different style than what I do. So that may be out there. I'm just not aware of it. So. I haven't really thought about that much. I just sort of chugging along doing it, whatever it is that I do, and I happen to live in a good area for that. Live in the San Francisco Bay Area. We've got some great venues here, and it's an area where people, kind of want to hear you lose the one and want to hear you go out and do a lot of improvisation. Apparently, not every area is like that, but
well,
I've settled here, so And then the because I'm involved in this genre, most of the places that I play and tour to are places where that's what they want. So, pretty much that's my narrow scope of the world of music today.
No, and that's cool. I think and you're still making a livelihood off of it. I'm just trying to put it back in the idea of when Barry Sless was 20 years old. I talked to Ahmad Jamal earlier this year, the guys playing burlesque houses and strip clubs, and those were heavy gigs. I mean, they were like 6-8 hour gigs, and they'd switch off drums and piano. They were getting paid for it. It was a gig, and now it's paid.
Right.
Now it's paid. I'm not talking about David Nelson or Pete Sears, that kind of stuff. But it's like, younger kids like, oh, pay to play, or you get the door. Like to me, like there's this philosophical thing that either you're going to stick your head in the sand and not see it, or realize that our society now is getting to a point where it's just looking at musicianship and saying, well, it's just music. It's not. You can't quantify. You can't quantify it. So therefore, it's pay to play.
That's discouraging.
That sucks, man.
The pay to play. I mean, I do remember. I guess when I started out, I think I had a house gig like 4 or 5 nights a week, 4 sets a night. At a bar with a country rock band, and that's where the shit developed. You going out there 4 or 5 times a week, and you got to mix it up and make it different because you got a lot of the same people in the bar, and that's sort of where you hone, or at least I honed my chops.
Exactly. Going back to the Cowboy Jazz album for just a second, how did you wind up getting that pressed on an album? Ted Jensen was the engineer on it. How did that wind up getting into and how many pressings of that were actually ever made?
I'm not exactly sure, but we were, the group had started in Maryland and somehow caught the attention of Rounder Records, and they came out to see us and liked what we were doing, and wanted to do a contract with us, and they put us into Tobias Studios in Springfield, Virginia. Actually, as I recall, it was Bob Dawson who was the engineer and partial producer on it. I think Ted mastered it, maybe.
You're exactly right. I was looking at exactly.
Yeah, so, and that was a real, that was a real learning experience for me. That was my first major project in the studio. And
what did you learn specifically?
Just a little bit more about tones in the studio and how things are, just a little different in the studio than they are live. I still prefer playing live to the studio. Different musicians will have different takes on that. Just learned a little bit about how things work in the studio, and what kind of sound what I want to hear in my headphones, and how much of myself to have in there, and just little kind of personal stuff like that.
I dig. Were you all? And also the other question is that. Was it the old school session where everybody was burning at the same time? You didn't have a lot of overdubs. I mean, everybody seemed like they were.
Yeah. It was pretty much done live, and then there might have been a part here or there that was fixed, and maybe the vocals were just scratch vocals to start with, and then they went in and overdubbed the tracks that were used, the vocal tracks that were used at a later time. And just to get back to an earlier question that maybe I didn't finish answering when you were asking about cowboy jazz and how we came up with that style, and I think I had reflected that there was an influence of Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys there. But when that first album came out, That's Like About the West, it got caught the attention of some media, and a thing that we were hearing a lot in the press things that we would get were that sounded like the Andrews Sisters backed by Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys, because the three ladies that were singing kind of had those kind of Andrews Sisters type harmonies, and then we sort of had what our take was on the music of Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys, or not that we were specifically going for that, but it was definitely an influence. And probably another group that used that influence to a much greater effect and really did some great stuff with it was Asleep at the Wheel.
Interesting.
I think probably Commander Cody and the Lost Planet Airmen, they had a touch of Western swing and stuff that they did as well that was influenced by Bob Wills.
Talking to Barry Sless here on the Jake Feinberg Show. It's just so funny. The interview I did before you was with a brethren of yours, Lauren Rowan, and he said,
"Oh, cool."
Before I got off the phone, he goes, "Ask Barry about Brattlebox."
Oh yeah.
What was that about?
That's a really cool project that Lauren and I do with this really great cello player named Doug Harmon, and I play mostly pedal steel. Doug plays cello. Lauren plays acoustic guitar, and we're doing mostly Lauren's originals, but some other select covers that we've sort of kind of made our own and put in our own style. And it's just a really unique thing. It's a unique blend of instrumentation. I think the first time we did a gig together, I remember Doug, who also plays piano. The first set was, me and Lauren and Doug on piano. And, it sounded good because he's a good player. And then after this, on the set break, he said to Lauren, hey, you mind if I bring my cello in? I think it would sound cool. And Lauren was like, sure. And from the first song to the next set, we started playing, and we're looking at each other like, are you hearing this? How I'm hearing this? Because it was just a really interesting and unique blend of instrumentation that just has some great textures. And so, we play songs, but we also go off into some timeless jams. So, and it's just it's a really cool thing. It's very unique and different than any of the other things that I do. Very intimate. It's we really just the three of us, and we really have to be listening to each other. And, sometimes there's a lot of space between the notes, and it's a real sensitive, dynamic thing.
I mean, are you playing like in wine country? What kind of gigs do you guys play?
We do everything from doing some wine country stuff to just doing some. We play at Terrapin once in a while. We play this pub locally where I live called Iron Springs Pub and Brewery, and some fair. We've done the Marin County Fair a couple times. We've done some openings for some larger acts.
No, it's fascinating. I had no idea there was a connection there, and he's like, make sure you ask him about Brattlebox. The what makes David Nelson a good leader in your opinion?
Let me see. I wouldn't necessarily refer to him as necessarily a leader.
Mm-hmm.
He's great with going along with the flow. He's a really good singer-songwriter. I love the songs that he writes. Many of them he writes with Robert Hunter. And he's just, I see David as like he's one of the few, if not the only, well, maybe not the only, because I think Bob Weir just put out a new record, from what I understand, with some new original stuff, but I kind of see David as one of the only guys from that original San Francisco 60s folk psychedelic scene that's still out there writing and playing new, vital music. I mean, some of the songs he's writing are really deep, and they're very quirky, and it's hard to classify them. They're not necessarily country rock, like the stuff he does with the New Riders.
Right.
Just sort of interesting, quirky, roots Americana jam rock and roll. And we have a great chemistry playing together. Sometimes you put guitar players together and they can both be playing at the same time. It can be cacophonous because they're not listening to each other, and one guy's trying to be heard over the other guy or whatever. And with Nelson and I, it's never been like that. He's one of the few guys that I feel we can both actually be soloing and playing at the same time. We know how to keep out of each other's way and make it musical.
Is he? But I mean, it's called the David Nelson Band, right? So I mean, it's the idea of like where he's not like your traditional. I don't know. In my mind, is he a leader because he allows everybody to have their own self-expression and doesn't step on toes, or does he put people in the band that he knows are going to accentuate the music that's in his head? I mean, or does he just put butts in the seats? I mean, why is his name on the?
Well, because basically he's the main singer songwriter. Him and I put the band together in 1994, and kind of it was sort of my suggestion, like, hey, let's get this guy. Oh, I think you'll love this guy, Mookie Siegel, great keyboard player and singer, and plays great accordion. And David's got a little side of him that a little Zydeco side too. So
I love it.
He kind of ran with my suggestions, and it's just sort of we all kind of lead it. I would say it's not really the type of thing where he's the guy and he tells everybody what to do, or he's really just like one of the guys, but it's a David Nelson Band because he's sort of the front man, and we're mainly playing his songs.
How do you are you a leader of any band right now?
I don't want to just come out and say that, but I mean, I do. A couple of the bands I'm in, I have a lot to say about the direction or the arrangements and stuff like that. And one of them would be, probably the most notable one would be Nelson Band.
So I mean, you really developed your leadership. I mean, it's a nice sort of, like we talked about before. There's a musical discussion on stage, but you are, sort of working on arrangements and how things are going to go, who's going to solo here. You feel like you're delegated with those kinds of responsibilities.
It kind of somehow worked out that way. Probably started in cowboy jazz towards the later days of cowboy jazz, where I started contributing a lot of arrangement ideas, and always turned out to be the guy that wrote the set lists. And it's sort of, continued to happen that way, and it's sort of that way in Nelson Band. Like I wouldn't say I'm the leader, because everybody has a really distinctive musical voice, and it really is a mutual thing. But I guess we could say I'm the organizer.
I like that.
That sounds better to me.
You know what? I like it. Also, are you in touch with any of the rhythm cats from the Cowboy Jazz group still?
Let me see. I just spoke to the drummer earlier today. One of the.
I mean, if they're up for an interview, I'd love to talk to them, because those cats are mercurial cats.
A couple of them are not with us anymore. Unfortunately, the fiddle player Denise passed away a number of years ago. But let me see.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe just give me. I mean, I was just curious. I'd love to connect with them and talk to them about Cowboy Jazz.
Cool. Well, Kate Bennett is still around, and Deanna Bogart is still around and out touring. Kate, I don't think she's out playing professionally anymore. She was the main songwriter in Cowboy Jazz. But I think she teaches music at a college on the Eastern Shore of Maryland.
So yeah, we'll get to that. The drummer too, a bass player too.
Bass player has passed on.
He's passed on. There's only before I let you go, Barry. There's only two letters that separate magic and music, and I'm not a musician, but I believe very much in the metaphysical parts of music, and most of the cats have gone there with me. And I just wanted to know if you could talk about a seminal moment on the bandstand when ultimately either you left your physical body, or as a group you transcended the music. Is there some memory that sticks out? Maybe not necessarily the first time, but a time when you realized the magic and the spiritual qualities of music.
Well, I've had a number of those moments, and I right now off the top of my head, I couldn't pinpoint one where it was like. But
like,
I mean,
you had one like 2 months ago, like this year. You've had them, so they're
yeah. I mean, I've had some moments on stage with Nelson Band where we're just all. Well, it is sort of like you leave your body and you're not thinking about what you're playing anymore. It's almost like you're hovering above, looking down, and the last thing you want to do at that point is think. It's just you're just reacting instinctively, and it's like there's another, like you're tapped into something else. There's something else that's orchestrating this whole thing and leading the thing, and it's sort of a fragile thing, because if you start to think about it, it's gone. So I can't. I mean, there is one specific moment I can remember in a different context where it was almost I left my body, and Peter Rowan was involved in that one. I know you spent some time with him recently.
Oh yeah, tell me about this. This is great.
We were playing in Hawaii. He came out and with Nelson Band for the past 10 years or so. We have a tour where we go to Hawaii in like January or February every year. And one year we brought Peter along to open the shows, and then to come out and sit in with us, and a couple of us would sit in with him. And we had a boat excursion that we did off of Maui, where we sold like 150 tickets, and we brought some gear on the boat, and we were going on a sunset whale watch. And we were going to play a set. So Peter invited this great Hawaiian slack key guitarist, George Kahamoku, who he was friendly with, or just started a friendship with at that point, invited him to come join us. So I remember, we'd been out there for a couple hours. The sun was starting to go down. We were anchored in front of the West Maui Mountains. The sun was at a low angle in the sky where the mountains were just sort of glowing green. And we start playing, and we're sort of doing a round robin where we do one of Peter's songs. So it's basically a David Nelson Band with Peter and George. So we'd play one of David's songs, and we'd play one of Peter's songs, and then we'd play one of George's songs, who, we hadn't heard it, we weren't familiar with it, his Hawaiian stuff. And I just remember playing one of his songs, and we're there in the fading light of the sun, and the mountains are glowing green, and the boat is slowly lilting back and forth, and there's whales breaching on two sides of the boat, and we're playing like this beautiful, like Hawaiian melody that that George was singing, and I just remember my eyes just closed. It was not a conscious thing, and all of a sudden I realized I'm sitting there swaying on the boat. My eyes are closed, and I'm in this like super blissed out state, this otherworldly blissed out state, while whales are breaching, and we're playing this beautiful music, which I very much from many times going to Hawaii, I've grown a real affinity for traditional Hawaiian, both slack key and steel guitar music. So for me, it was just like, oh, this is what it's all about.
I love it, Barry. I mean, on that note, we had a really hot 50-minute set here. I'd love to do set 2 sometime down the road, but I really had a ball with you, man.
Oh, well, great. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate your in-depth questions, and you obviously you know your stuff.
Well, you know what, man. I'm a journalist, and you guys have helped me find my voice. But after 5 years, I mean, I know I'm on a blessed path, and I'm just basically trying to connect the dots in music, because in my mind, I just think also genres and labels have destroyed music, and I just think it's important to get back to this idea that it's all music. It's either good or bad. So you guys have helped me find my voice, and I'm burning away, man. So keep swinging, man. We got a lot of good stuff today.
Cool. Well, great. I'm happy to do it, and if you want, at some point, I'll send you some live Nelson Band stuff.
Oh yeah, no, I'm cooking with Nelson. Hit me up. He said he doesn't know how he's going to be, but he's going to try tomorrow. So yeah, no, send me some live Nelson, and I don't know, make your way down to Tucson, man, because we'll burn. I'd love to see you guys live.
Sounds great. I'll make sure if we work out to come down there to give you the heads up.
All right, babe. Be good, man.
Great. You too, Jake.
Later
Thanks so
on,
much.
dude. Later.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Heavy day here on the Jake Feinberg Show. We heard from Lauren Rowan in hour number 1. And just heard from a tremendous multi-instrumentalist, Barry Sless, great electric guitar player and pedal steel player, and, really heavy dude who's still cultivating his own sound and a multitude of bands and keeping the spirit alive. We'll be back tomorrow, like I said, with new rider David Nelson. Until then, let's rejoin the Jim Parisi Show in progress.
If you combine the McCabe stuff we just told you about with Comey not calling for a grand jury and basically giving Secretary Clinton every benefit of every doubt, again, you have the appearance of